Have you ever wondered why people with extraordinary IQs often fail miserably in their personal and professional lives, while others with seemingly average intelligence achieve profound success and happiness? This question haunted me during years of research until I discovered a disturbing truth. Everything we were taught about intelligence was fundamentally wrong. We grew up in a society that venerates the ability to solve complex equations, memorize data, and process information quickly. Our educational systems are temples dedicated to the cult of analytical intelligence. Proud parents display their children report cards like war trophies. Companies hire based on cognitive tests, and universities rank students by their ability to regurgitate knowledge under pressure. But what if all of this is a colossal illusion? What if the true intelligence necessary to thrive in the 21st century doesn't reside in the mind, but in the heart? For decades, we have witnessed the peculiar phenomenon of technology geniuses who revolutionized the digital world but are incapable of maintaining stable relationships. We see brilliant CEOs who destroy companies because they cannot read their team's emotions. We observe societies that are digitally hyper-connected but profoundly emotionally fragmented. The global pandemic revealed with crystal clarity that our sophisticated analytical intelligence was insufficient to navigate the emotional chaos that befell humanity. People with multiple university degrees suffered mental collapse, while others with limited formal education demonstrated extraordinary emotional resilience that kept them functional and hopeful. The history of human intelligence is a fascinating narrative of evolution and adaptation. Thousands of years ago, our hunter-gatherer ancestors developed cognitive capacities that allowed them to survive in hostile environments. The ability to calculate distances, memorize seasonal patterns, and solve immediate practical problems was a matter of life and death. These skills crystallized into what we now call logical mathematical intelligence, the same that our IQ tests still obsessively measure. But something fundamental changed. The challenges we face today are no longer about knowing whether to flee from a predator or finding potable water. The crucial problems of contemporary existence are essentially emotional. How to build meaningful relationships in an era of superficial connections, how to find purpose in an automated world, how to maintain mental balance in an avalanche of constant information and stimuli. The technological revolution of the last 50 years has created an extraordinary paradox. We have developed machines that surpass our analytical intelligence in practically all measurable dimensions. Computers calculate millions of times faster than our brains, process astronomical amounts of data, and identify patterns that completely escape human perception. Artificial intelligence already demonstrates capabilities we considered exclusively human. It defeats world champions in chess and Go, diagnoses diseases with precision superior to experienced doctors, translates languages instantly, and even produces art and literature that moves and inspires. If intelligence were really about information processing and logical problem solving, we would already be obsolete. But we are not. Why? Because we forgot something fundamental. We are emotional creatures who occasionally think, not thinking machines that occasionally feel. This realization led me to a deep investigation into the true determinants of human success and well-being. What I discovered was revolutionary. Longitudinal studies that followed thousands of people for decades reveal a consistent pattern: the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, both our own and others, is the most powerful predictor of personal and professional achievement, surpassing any traditional measure of cognitive intelligence. Harvard studied its MBA classes for 30 years and discovered that students with the highest academic grades rarely became the most successful leaders. Those who thrived were those who developed the ability to inspire trust, navigate interpersonal conflicts, and emotionally adapt to constant market changes. Emotional intelligence operates in 4 interconnected dimensions that define our ability to function effectively in the contemporary social world. The first is emotional self-awareness, the ability to recognize and name our own emotional states in real time. It seems simple, but most people live in a state of almost total emotional illiteracy. We ask how someone is feeling, and the most common response is fine or bad, as if the infinite spectrum of human emotional experience could be reduced to 2 primitive categories. The second dimension is self-regulation, the ability to manage our emotional responses consciously and constructively. It's not about suppressing emotions, but choosing how to express and channel them productively. The third is empathy, the ability to perceive, understand, and appropriately respond to other people's emotional states. And the fourth is social skills, the ability to use our emotional intelligence to build relationships, lead effectively, and create harmony even in conflict situations. I want to pause for a moment to ask, in how many situations in your life have you felt you had all the technical knowledge necessary to solve a problem, but simply couldn't because there were unresolved emotional issues involved? Perhaps an argument with a coworker where you agreed on the facts, but the underlying emotional tension prevented any real progress. Or an important decision where you rationally knew what the right choice was, but your emotions pulled you in the opposite direction, creating frustrating internal paralysis. I know many of us keep these experiences as personal failures when they actually reveal something profound about the nature of human intelligence. If this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It could be as simple as writing, "My emotional intelligence challenges me when." Your honesty can illuminate the path for someone facing similar dilemmas, showing that we are all learning to navigate this complex and fundamental dimension of human existence. The corporate world is undergoing a silent revolution that few fully perceive. The most valuable companies on the planet are no longer those with the best algorithms or most advanced technologies, but those that manage to create emotionally intelligent cultures. Google implemented mindfulness and emotional intelligence programs for its engineers and discovered that emotionally conscious teams are significantly more innovative and productive. Microsoft credited its resurrection under Satya Nadella's leadership not to technological advances, but to a cultural transformation focused on empathy and emotional growth. These companies understood something fundamental. In an era where machines can process information, the human competitive advantage lies in our unique capacity to connect, inspire, and create meaning through emotional intelligence. Education is beginning to recognize this transformative reality, albeit still incipiently. Countries like Singapore and Denmark have already integrated emotional intelligence development into their national curricula, recognizing that preparing young people for the future means equipping them with skills that machines will never be able to replicate. Children learn not only mathematics and sciences, but also to identify emotions, practice empathy, and resolve interpersonal conflicts. The results are extraordinary. More cohesive societies, lower rates of youth anxiety and depression, and a generation better prepared for the complex challenges of the 21st century. Meanwhile, educational systems that remain obsessed with standardized testing and memorization are producing brilliantly analytical but emotionally fragile young people, unable to deal with frustrations, rejections, or ambiguities that characterize adult life. This transformation is not just a matter of personal optimization or professional success. We are facing global challenges that require extraordinary levels of emotional cooperation between different cultures, nations, and ideologies. Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization, global pandemics, none of these problems can be solved through pure analytical intelligence. They require our ability to transcend tribal differences, create emotional bridges between conflicting groups, and maintain hope and determination in the face of overwhelming complexities. Emotional intelligence is no longer a luxury for personal development. It is an existential necessity for the survival of human civilization. But there is a profound obstacle in this journey of recognizing emotional intelligence: our own cultural resistance. We have been conditioned for generations to see emotions as signs of weakness, irrational distractions that should be overcome by superior logic. This artificial dichotomy between reason and emotion has created societies of emotionally illiterate people who pride themselves on their rationality. Men, especially, have been trained from childhood to suppress emotional expressions, resulting in epidemics of loneliness, depression, and violence that could be drastically reduced through emotional intelligence development. Women, although culturally more authorized to express emotions, often face the opposite challenge. Their emotional capacities are devalued as too sentimental for serious professional environments. Modern neuroscience is revealing the fallacy of this separation between reason and emotion. We have discovered that emotions are not obstacles to rational thinking. They are essential components of all effective decision-making. People with lesions in brain regions responsible for emotional processing maintain their analytical capacities intact, but completely lose the ability to make sensible choices in real life. They can solve complex mathematical problems, but cannot decide what to have for lunch or how to invest money. This suggests something revolutionary. True human intelligence is always a synthesis of cognitive and emotional capacities, and our obsession with measuring only one dimension is profoundly limited. Emotional intelligence also offers us a transformative perspective on leadership and influence. The most memorable leaders in human history were not necessarily the most analytically brilliant, but those who managed to touch collective emotions and inspire coordinated actions. Martin Luther King Jr. did not change the world through statistical data on racial inequality, but through his ability to articulate dreams and hopes that resonated emotionally with millions of people. Gandhi did not defeat the British Empire with superior logical arguments, but through emotional intelligence that managed to transform resistance into compassion and hatred into mutual respect. These examples illustrate a fundamental truth. Leadership is not about having the best answers, but about asking the right questions and creating emotional spaces where others can find their own solutions. In the world of personal relationships, emotional intelligence proves even more crucial. Marriages and deep friendships do not depend on intellectual compatibility, although this is pleasant, but on the ability to navigate emotional differences with grace and understanding. Couples who remain together for decades are not those who never disagree, but those who have developed emotional skills to repair ruptures, express vulnerabilities, and maintain emotional connection even during conflicts. Parents who raise emotionally healthy children are not necessarily the most formally educated, but those who manage to attune to their children's emotional worlds and offer consistent emotional presence. Technology is accelerating this need for emotional intelligence in unexpected ways. Social networks have created environments where our interactions are constantly mediated by algorithms that amplify intense emotions, but offer us few opportunities to develop the nuances of face-to-face emotional communication. Young people who grew up entirely in the digital era paradoxically demonstrate greater social anxiety and fewer interpersonal skills, despite being technically connected constantly. This suggests that emotional intelligence requires in-person practice, direct human contact, and shared vulnerability experiences that cannot be completely replicated digitally. There are also spiritual and existential dimensions of emotional intelligence that are often ignored in more technical approaches. The ability to find meaning in suffering, to maintain hope during periods of prolonged uncertainty, to connect with something greater than ourselves. These are profound manifestations of emotional intelligence that determine our ability to thrive in the face of life's inevitable adversities. People who develop this dimension of emotional intelligence demonstrate extraordinary resilience that transcends external circumstances and becomes a source of strength for entire communities. The journey to develop emotional intelligence is not a superficial self-improvement project, but a fundamental transformation of how we relate to ourselves and the world. It begins with the courage to feel fully, without judgment or resistance, the emotions that life inevitably brings. It continues with the practice of observing our emotional reactions with scientific curiosity, as if we were anthropologists studying a fascinating and complex culture. It develops through honest conversations about our deepest vulnerabilities, fears, and hopes. And it matures when we learn to use our emotions as valuable information about ourselves and our relationships, instead of trying to escape them or control them rigidly. The future belongs to those who can integrate analytical and emotional intelligence into a harmonious and powerful synthesis It's not about abandoning intellectual rigor or critical thinking capacity, but recognizing that these capacities reach their maximum potential when guided by emotional wisdom. Imagine scientists who not only discover truths about the universe, but manage to communicate these discoveries in ways that inspire and connect entire communities. Visualize engineers who not only build efficient technologies, but create solutions that respond to users' deep emotional needs. Consider political leaders who not only formulate logically consistent policies, but manage to generate trust and cooperation in diverse and often conflicting populations. This vision is not utopian. It is urgently necessary. We are living in a historical moment where our analytical intelligence has given us the power to alter the planet, but our emotional intelligence has not yet matured enough to use this power wisely. We have the technical capacity to destroy entire ecosystems, but struggle to cooperate emotionally in preserving them. We can create weapons that would annihilate civilizations, but cannot resolve basic interpersonal conflicts in our own communities. We have developed medicines that prolong life, but entire societies suffer epidemics of loneliness and lack of existential meaning. The transformation of education, organizations, and society toward recognizing emotional intelligence is not just a natural evolution. It is a race against time. As artificial intelligence assumes increasingly sophisticated analytical functions, our unique value as human beings will increasingly reside in our emotional, creative, and relational capacities. Those who have prepared for this reality will thrive. Those who remain fixated on obsolete models of purely analytical intelligence will find increasing irrelevance and disconnection. If these reflections have touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you are not alone. By joining our community, you will connect with people who share your understanding that the true intelligence necessary to thrive in the 21st century transcends traditional measures and embraces the totality of human experience. Each week, we explore together insights that can transform not only how we think about intelligence, but how we live our lives with greater emotional wisdom and authentic connection. This is not just a channel about abstract concepts, but a space for practical growth where we learn concrete tools to develop our emotional intelligence. Subscribe to continue this essential conversation about how to integrate mind and heart into a truly human intelligence, adequate for the extraordinary challenges and transformative opportunities of our time. The journey to a more conscious and emotionally connected life begins with recognizing that our capacity to feel deeply is not a weakness to be overcome, but our greatest strength to be cultivated and celebrated. For the first time in history, it is technically possible to annihilate privacy. If you think about authoritarian regimes, throughout history they always wanted to monitor their citizens around the clock. But this was technically impossible. Even in the Soviet Union, you have 200 million Soviet citizens. You can't follow them all the time because the KGB didn't have 200 million agents. And even if the KGB somehow got 200 million agents,
That's not enough. In the Soviet Union, it's still basically paper bureaucracy, the secret police. If a secret agent followed you around 24 hours a day, at the end of the day, they write a paper report about you and send it to KGB headquarters in Moscow. So imagine, every day, KGB headquarters is flooded with 200 million paper reports. Now, to be useful for anything, somebody needs to read and analyze them. They can't do it. They don't have the analysts. Therefore, even in the Soviet Union, some level of privacy was still the default for most people. Philosophers like Charles Taylor and psychologists and others, they looked into this kind of mental atom of the self and realized, like the physical atom, it's not solid at all. It contains not just multitude of subparticles, but they are constantly moving and interacting and changing.
Did it help you understand something about yourself?
Yes, that what I define as myself itself needs a lot more exploration. You think you know yourself, but you don't. Not just, the kind of individual events of your life. Your very understanding of what is a self is far from self-evident. And it is itself the product of a lot of stories and mythologies which are not necessarily true. The problem of truth is that the truth, first of all, is costly, whereas fiction is very cheap. If you want to write a truthful history book about the Roman Empire, for instance, you need to invest a lot of energy, time, money. You need to study Latin. You probably need to study Greek, ancient Greek. You need to do archaeological excavations and find these ancient, whether inscriptions or pottery or weapons, and analyze them. Very costly and difficult. To write a fictional story about the Roman Empire, very easy. You just write anything you want and it's there on the page or on the internet. The truth is often also very complicated because reality is complicated. You want to give a truthful explanation for why the Roman Republic fell or why the Roman Empire eventually fell. Very complicated. Whereas fiction can be made as simple as possible, and people tend to prefer simple explanations over complicated ones. And finally, the truth can be painful, unattractive. We often don't want to know the truth about ourselves, whether as individuals, which is why we go to therapy for many years to know the things we don't want to know about ourselves, and also on the level of entire nations. Each nation has its own dark episodes, its own skeletons or cemeteries in the closet that people don't want to know about. A politician that, in an election campaign would just tell people the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, is unlikely to win many votes. So in this competition between the truth, which is costly and complicated and sometimes painful, and fiction, which is cheap and simple, and you can make it very attractive, fiction tends to win. And if you look at, the large-scale systems, networks in history, they are often built on fictions, not on the truth.